Now I added this my other self because it's is widely understood in our disciplines, in these humanities and social science disciplines, that there is a part of the self that is other to myself. Right? Sometimes we can't say with confidence that we know ourselves thoroughly. Yeah. So hence my other self. Yeah. So answering the call for care as call of the other is a non-indifferent response to the difference or differences between the one who is caring and the one who is receiving care. But what exactly are these differences? These differences may seem readily apparent or may be anticipated by professional experience, but they can never be fully grasped. A failure to recognize ungraspability of the other could still result in technically effective care. So, in other words, an act of care could still be performed. To achieve care that is not merely performed and dependent on the care recipient's conformance to the carer's sphere of rote knowledge and experiences, the care provider or giver must consciously imagine the one being cared for as having the potential to, if not flourish, then at least adapt well to their changed and changing circumstances. Those who are very good at caring, very good at their job, at their profession, do not need to be told of this. They are always constantly consciously imagining the one being cared for as having the potential to flourish or at least to adapt well to their changing circumstances. So in other words, the carer must imagine care in the other's place to relate to the other. The main route to understanding the other and their needs is via the leap of the embodied imagination. Now, I'm not talking about empathy here. I'm talking about the imagination, an embodied imagination, without which caring relations between humans cannot be established. Right. So, narratives of illness, and we're only halfway through the slides, and I'm already giving you the answer to the research question of today's presentation already. The value of these stories, narratives of illness and care, they provoke and facilitate such leaps of the human imagination. As writers, audiences, and readers enter the fictive worlds of stories, they enter an other world to become more human. What does it mean to become more human? This has nothing to do with the principles of humanism or even medical humanism. Alan Sitsu asks and answers, we live, but why do we live? I think to become more human, more capable of reading the world, more capable of playing it in all ways. This does not mean nicer or more humanistic. I would say more faithful to what we are made from and to what we can create. I cannot emphasize this enough. This has nothing to do with niceness. Yeah. So to be more human is to engage with our imaginative capacity to create. And I would add co-create with other humans, the multitude of ways in which human experiences are lived. Right. So the word playing then, right? Oh, sorry, I missed this slide. So more human. Oh, okay. So the word playing, therefore, does not only refer to the roles we actually play in our lives, but it is also indicative of our capacity to imagine embodying realities by interpreting or playing them in our minds. Right. So when playing stories in our minds, we are practicing an engagement with the other or others through the hermeneutic circle or the circle of understanding. Now I'm going to explain this, describe this diagram a bit. This diagram is freely available under Creative Commons license. You can find it anywhere. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. Okay, so right here you see two big circles, context and text. So context really is, imagine this as your brain, right? You're assembling things that you're reading from the text, right? So imagine this, okay? Let's imagine this with me. You are at a library right now. You're in the library or you're at a bookstore. You pick up a book maybe because the title attracted you somehow, right? It's something that you would like to read. So what you do is that you pick up the book, you turn to the back of the book and you read the synopsis. You're thinking, yeah, this is something that I think I would like to read. Yeah. So by this time, like before you even walk towards the cashier, you already have an idea of what this book is about, right? This forms the initial understanding of the book's context, right? So you have an initial context in your mind as you carry the book home. As you plop yourself down on your couch and you start reading, this is when, looking at the diagram, now I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you move towards stage number one, which is from context, this initial context, you move on to the text where you start reading, and your context expands more, right? You get more information from the text and you develop a new understanding. So this is stage two, a new understanding, and your context broadens, deepens, or is even perhaps overturned, right? The initial understanding is even overturned. All right, so this new context, right, whether it's expanded, broadened, deepened, or turned completely on its head, what this does is that this new context, right, you will carry it with you as you approach the text at the second sitting. You're going to continue reading the text again, and you're getting more information, accumulating new understanding, and your context expands a bit more. Yeah, so this is the hermeneutic circle. The word hermeneutic sounds very intimidating, maybe like, oh, it sounds very cheap, right? But it really isn't. If you think, just think of it as an interpretive circle, right? So it's about interpretation. Hermeneutics is about interpretation. So this is the interpretive circle that most people would engage with as they are reading, all right? Now that I've explained the hermeneutic circle of understanding, let's move on to what Gadamer has to say about this circle of understanding. All right, so bear this diagram and what I've just described to you in mind as you listen to what I have to say, what Gadamer has to say about this. Far from it being the case that whoever listens to someone else or approaches a literary text must bring along no pre-opinion about the content and must forget all his own opinions. It is rather the case that openness for the opinion of the other or of the text. So if we go back to the slide here, this diagram, you can think of the text as the other, right? The text is other, okay? So it is rather the case that openness for the opinion of the other or of the text will always include setting it in relation to the whole of one's own opinions or setting oneself to it, but always bring our pre-opinions into reading the text. Put differently, opinions are indeed a changeable variety of possibilities. But within this variety of what people can think, i.e. of what a reader can find sensible and thus can expect, not everything is possible. And whoever hears past what the other is really saying will not in the end be able to fit it into his own manifold expectation of meaning. So here too, there is a standard. The person who wants to understand a text, and this is an important point to take home with you, the person who wants to understand a text is ready to be told something by it. So a hermeneutically trained mind must from the start be open to the otherness of the text. One has to be aware of one's own bias so that the text presents itself in its truth in the matter at hand against the interpreter's pre-opinion. So what does this mean? Let me unpack this for you. So when we ask the question, how can I help? Right, we're really answering the call for care. So to answer the call for care is to want to understand how one can help with the needs of the other. Put in the context of Gadamer's description of the circle of understanding just quoted above, wanting to understand is being open to the fact that pre-opinions, so your initial context, initial understanding about a situation or the subject of care could be toppled, changed, broadened, deepened at any point of this hermeneutic enterprise, in this interpretive enterprise. This is akin to what Levinas refers to in the previous quote on the non-indifference of the other's difference as an extraordinary relation. Extraordinary because it does not re-establish the order of representation in which every past returns. So every time we shift from text to context, and then again, new context to text, every time there is this shift, there is a re-establishment of the order of representation. It's not a repetition of, it doesn't mirror, it doesn't repeat our expectations. Something new is added, something different, yeah? So to elaborate, as an understanding of the other is being constructed, the pre-opinions of the one seeking understanding are called into question. They change. A stubborn attempt to hang on to these pre-opinions and prejudices on a subject matter instead of letting the other's differences permeate and calibrate an understanding of the other, would hear past what the other is really saying, highlighted here, uh, and lead to a failure to understand. An openness to the otherness of the text is therefore to be comfortable with the uncertainty of this process that vacillates between familiarity and strangeness of what is said, which Gadamer refers to as the between and the true place of hermeneutics. Russia say et al. Elaborate that Gadamer viewed hermeneutics not as developing a way of understanding, but as a means to illuminate the conditions in which understanding, perception, experience, and knowing itself takes place. So really an amalgamation of our existing understanding, lived experiences, and the creative imagination. Writers and readers co-create relationalities that are not transcendental, but immanent within itself. This is actually very different from what we would normally understand of relationality as some kind of commonality that transcends the self and reaches out to the other. So this is my assumption that writers and readers co-create relationalities that are not transcendental but immanent within each self. By transcendental, I mean go beyond the limits of the self to reach another. Writers and readers do not rise beyond the limits of the self to reach another. Let me repeat, the relationality between writer and reader is immanent within each self. It does not go beyond the limits of the self. My preliminary observation is this, that relationality is fundamentally established in processes of writing and reading a text at different points in time. For instance, relationality in the writing of an illness narrative is established with an imaginary reader prior to the publication of a text. Right. So this, as the writer is writing, the writer is imagining a reader. So this reader has not come into being yet. Relationality with the text as other in the reading of an illness narrative is established at the point of reading it. This problematizes the expectation that relationality must always be a neatly graded and self-transcending connection between people. The value of Patient's story thus lies in the pocket of space or gap that affords the writer and reader a relational understanding that is immanent to each self. This space is in fact a door to interpretive possibilities rather than a frame that confines illness stories to a static function of invoking or cultivating empathy. Ultimately, if there's only one thing that you take away from today's session, I hope it is this, that narrative worlds are open to the reader's entanglement of lived experiences and imaginative possibilities. Such an entanglement offers the potential to create models of social relations that one can potentially build upon or not. I've included this concept of the immanent imagination here because I do want to point out something to you. I know that I've been talking quite a bit about the imagination and creativity. And it's important to point out that before Rene Descartes came along, the imagination was thought of as a bridge between phenomenon and our and reason. So it's like a passageway or a means for us to process what we see, what we hear from external reality, process it, and then incorporate that into our reason. Right. So before Descartes, this was that. But Rene Descartes came along, and what happens was that imagination became bound up with this binary opposition with reality. So imagination became your unicorns, your Narnia, your Harry Potter, everything that is not real, right? So what I'm really talking about is that narratives of illness and care uh, supports our employment of the immanent imagination. The immanent imagination can be defined as an imagination that is in no sense static and free floating, but entirely caught up in projects of action that aim to have real effects on the material world, and as such, always changing and adapting. David Graeber uses crafting a knife or a piece of jewelry or trying to make sure one doesn't hurt a friend's feelings as examples of the immanent imagination that has real world consequences and effects. But I would like to add that reading texts, reading narratives of illness and care have that real world effect of honing your ability to attend to the nuances of lived experiences. And once you have trained yourself enough, you can think of reading texts as a kind of training for your keenness, your competencies. Um, Once you've trained yourself well enough, when you're listening to patients, when you're talking to patients, when you're having a conversation with anyone, really, you'll be much better at attending to the nuances, to what they are saying and what they are not saying, even as they are speaking. Yeah. So that's all I have for you. I was also it was also suggested that I give you a list of recommended readings. And here are some Singapore titles and international ones I specifically foreground the local ones because I think that they don't gain as much attention as they deserve. So there's Mahita Vasu's A Good Day to Die Inside a Suicidal Mind, The Sound of SCH by Danelle Lim, Cry in the Dark by Terence Ang, it's quite a recent title, and Li Shan Chan's A Philosopher's Madness, who incidentally is here today at NTU for a research session. Yeah. So, and then there's the international ones that perhaps many of you are already familiar with. There's Paul Kalaniti's When Breath Becomes Air. And I highly recommend The Museum of Words, a memoir of language, writing, and mortality by Georgia Bain, who was an Australian writer. Yeah. So with that, thank you very much. Please feel free to scan the QR code if you want to learn more about medical humanities research. Get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think this is actually the second time I'm listening to this, and I must say, each time I listen to it, the more I take away from it. So maybe I should listen to you talk about it the third time.
Thanks for
Okay.
being willing to
Okay, we have some questions in the Q&A. Joanne, I'll just read the first question first, and maybe you can take the second one. So the first question is from Prof. Aaron Ang from Department of Psychiatry. I'm just going to read his question because it is very cheap to you. So Prof. Aaron asks, is there an Eastern philosophical concept of the other in Taoism, Confucius, or Brahman traditions?
I have to be super honest with you. Like these are all very fascinating areas of inquiries, but I'm afraid I'm not familiar with them to be able to answer this question. I'm sure there is. Yeah, but I can't be sure. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. My area is really I look at a lot of continental philosophers. Mainly because I started out as a Beckett scholar, Samuel Beckett. He's a European playwright. So my studies have been quite focused on European philosophers. Yeah, apologies.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. I think Prof. Ang has another chim question. Maybe this one is easier to answer. He's asking, what is the role of the senior clinician in helping his or her learner appreciate the thicker concept of his story or her story, i.e. the patient's story, history?
Why specifically the senior clinicians in this question? That's my question.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I wonder what is the because there yeah, why senior clinician?
I wonder whether it is in his role as a senior clinician himself and how he how does he bring value to the interactions that he has with his residents, yeah, that he can help them, you know, apply whatever he has heard from you today. I think.
Okay. So what is the role of the senior clinician in helping his or her learner, as in a junior clinician, for example? I see, I see. From my interactions with many clinicians, especially the ones who feel very strongly about the importance of patient stories, they've told me that this is a this is almost an uphill battle, right? Junior clinicians they still don't really understand the importance of these stories. They only know that they have to get whatever they need to get done, right? So what is the role of senior clinician? I think it's the emphasis on understanding these concepts that maybe this is quite self-serving. Understanding these concepts that I'm trying to articulate, the concept of the other and how that has a specific uh, implication on your self-knowledge as well. So the personal stakes have to be emphasized. That you're not listening to the patient because you are trying to. You can't really use the reason of patient-centered care because it's very um even though it's called like patient-centered or person-centered care, very personal, but it's actually quite depersonalizing for the I don't know for the healthcare worker perhaps because the patient is put at the centers and then where do I stand, right? So I think concepts like the other puts into focus that the relationality between self and other with the other is inextricably tied to the self. So if we can try to angle it in such a way to the junior learners, let them understand that it's also for their personal development, for understanding themselves. I think that would be really useful. Yeah, yes. This reminds me of the conversation I had with Joyce. The last time we met, Joyce, you said something about a patient who was talking a lot about things that don't really matter. Do you want to like describe
Yeah,
that again? Yeah.
sure. Actually, it was like a hypothetical patient, but I think all clinicians here know what I mean. I think many healthcare professionals in our head have this illness script because that's how we learn in medical school or nursing school. Like, um, a patient with a pneumonia should present like this. I should find this, and therefore I do this. So it's a very like neat mental framework we have, and but oftentimes real life is not like that. Especially for me and Joanne, we are both geriatricians, so older adults, and in fact, I think many people don't have these scripts in their head like what healthcare professionals have. So when they tell you their story or they're presenting complaint, it doesn't come out very nicely in that way. So for example, the ama may tell me, you're asking about her shortness of breath, and then she'll tell you that, oh yeah, 10 years ago my grandson also had shortness of breath, and then it was this. And then, oh, my son also went to see a GP for shortness of breath, and then the GP told him it was this. And then in many people's head, including my head, even right up to now, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. You feel slightly frustrated. You're like, this doesn't fit in the mental framework in my mind. There's a lot of tension there, and you feel like you're not telling me the story I want to hear. And I wonder, like, what they're talking about, how does this relate to this tension that a lot of healthcare professionals have
Mm.
when it comes to illness scripts and what live experience of real patients have.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. So this is the part where I was talking about in this